These are going to be fairly practical observations. The first one is maybe one of the hardest things, so we're just going to start there.
Because I know myself well enough to know I just may never come out of that black hole.
It's simply that it takes less time and money to attend a virtual event. I love to learn, I love to grow, and virtual events make conferences much more accessible.
Plus, you can maybe attend in your PJs and like fuzzy slippers if that's your thing.
That's an option. There you go. All right, well, today I've been thinking about events, virtual events in particular, because we've got an event of our own coming up, Live to Lead. It's in a few weeks, and as I personally prepare for that kind of thing, I thought that it might be useful to share some tips on preparing for a virtual event, or really how to make the most of attending a virtual event. Maybe that's a better way to think about it. And it's not the same as an in-person event. So wanted to talk about that. And they've just increased in volume in the past few years. There's so many virtual events, so many opportunities. So felt like it was worth talking about this and helping people out a little bit.
Yeah, nice. Okay, so have you been to a lot of virtual events?
Yeah, I have been to quite a few virtual events. I've also spoken at virtual events as well. So I've kind of been on both sides of it. And of course, with the event we are hosting, I'm going to also have some host experience, if you will, on virtual events. So in the past, I've probably done, I don't know, I don't really count them, probably in the dozens. The first virtual event I attended was probably in 2009, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've been going to them for quite a while. They've been a thing for a while. The technology has evolved, but the general experience and limitations hasn't changed a lot. So I've experienced a lot of them. There's probably a bit of a spectrum of really poorly done, bad events. There are incredibly engaging and almost immersive virtual events on another extreme end of the spectrum. But really, most of the ones I've done are kind of in the middle. They're just good. They're quality, good, content-centric events. So definitely attended a lot in different categories of learning, business, technology, leadership, that kind of stuff. And so I've kind of had to learn to make the most of them.
Yeah. Well, okay. So I'm a sucker for a good like in-person conference. I've been to plenty of those. I really enjoy that process. I haven't done quite as many virtual ones. So why do you enjoy virtual conferences? What do you feel like some of the pros are?
They're very pragmatic for me. The biggest one is probably fairly obvious. It's simply that it takes less time and money to attend a virtual event. So I love to learn, I love to grow, and virtual events make conferences much more accessible. I don't travel a lot for work. When I do, I've got more things to think about. I've got kids, I've got dogs. I have to coordinate things to make sure that I can be gone. And going quote unquote to a virtual event simplifies a lot of things on the logistics side. There's obviously a cost side as well. So I don't have to pay for either the gas or airfare to attend an in-person event. I don't have to pay for lodging, whether it's hotel or something. I don't have to pay for the food that I would. There's just so much cost savings involved as well when you can go to or attend a virtual event. And so those things really, they're very practical. But that's one of the things I love the most about what a virtual event offers. And for me, it's in many cases, it's worth the trade-off of not having some of the things that you get when you are at an in-person event. I still love in-person events, don't get me wrong.
Sure.
But those are some of the biggest and simplest reasons that I really do enjoy the option or opportunity for virtual events.
Plus, you can maybe attend in your PJs and like fuzzy slippers if that's your thing.
That's an option. There you go.
Okay, so I know that we want to help people be more intentional if they're going to consider attending a virtual conference because it is different in nature. The flow is different. So what are some of the things that we should keep in mind if we're going to consider attending a virtual conference? What would help us benefit from that experience?
Again, these are going to be fairly practical observations, things that are very easy to do, or rather to say. Some of them not so simple to actually do, though. So the first one is maybe one of the hardest things. So we're just going to start there. We're going to start with the hard part, and it has to do with distractions. A big temptation when you attend a virtual event is to have some screen or window, or maybe even just have something off to the side on your phone where there's a video playing and somebody's teaching you something, or there's a session on, and your attention is actually on a different part of your screen or a different device altogether. You're in your inbox, you're in Slack or Microsoft Teams, or maybe even just on LinkedIn or Facebook or some social media site. There's a temptation to divide your attention. And the first thing that I always think about for myself is, how do I make sure that I'm limiting my distractions as I try to get something out of this event? The main reason is I've still probably spent money to attend, and I'm committing some time to this. If I spend that time with attention that is divided, I am really undercutting my opportunity to do anything good with that time. And it's my time. I should care what I'm doing with it. I want to make the most of what I'm participating in. So for me, what that looks like is I use mostly Apple devices. And so I use my focus modes to limit notifications. Limiting notifications for me on whatever device that you use is one of the best things you can do to give your attention to an event. And so I don't get pings for new emails when I'm attending an event. I don't get pings from Slack or other tools that might give me notifications on any device.
Google
media
alerts, like for Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift. Those
right.
can just be
You
limited.
you have to know yourself and understand what you need to limit or filter out. Right. So you have an easy access to managing how you get distracted by notifications, but most of us don't really curate that, and we need to. So if you're going to make the most of something like this, look at your notifications and minimize them. Sometimes that means closing certain apps if it's a actual piece of software. Sometimes it's closing a browser tab. I use Gmail in a browser for all of my email. I will completely close it when I'm trying to focus on something. One example is an event. So limit your distractions. It's within your control. Limit them. So that's the biggest thing. And for some of us, because we're just so used to being accessible or having divided attention, it can be a hard step to actually commit to, but it's actually a rather simple action to take. And once you're done with your event, turn it back on. Do whatever you need to. But for the sake of your attention, your learning, your growth, limit those notifications during the event. So that's the first thing. And it just has to do with presence. Be present.
Nice.
After that, there's something else that almost every virtual event I've attended includes. If the event is more than an hour, you're probably going to have some kind of break built into the event schedule. If you're doing a multi-hour event, there's probably a 5, 10, 15-minute break or more. If you're doing a multi-day virtual event, you have probably, you're going to have a one or more kind of meal breaks. You're going to have breaks.
Yeah.
Now, not every event host treats breaks the same way, so they might try to keep you engaged depending on the event. But if you're in an event, like most of the ones I've attended online, they almost are just kind of like, hey, we're not here for the next 10 minutes. Go do what you need to. So here's the suggestion I have for staying present, going back to that first topic, staying present, but considering the breaks that you have. Don't go into your inbox during a break. Don't go into Slack or Microsoft Teams or whatever, if you have like a company chat. Don't go into social media. If you can help, if you don't have a job where you need to be keeping a pulse on things so regularly, just plan to not check those things out during a break. What you can do instead during a break is give yourself some mental margin, some space to process what you've just heard. Maybe you're the kind of person who takes notes on paper. Maybe during that break, you're sitting back and just looking at your notes, thinking about what was really valuable to me from that session. And then a lot of us who attend virtual events do it from a space where we work in a remote environment, or we're just attached to a desk. A virtual event almost by definition means you're sitting somewhere. So during a break, especially for longer virtual events, stand up, walk around. If it's long enough, maybe go for a walk outside. Keep some movement in your day. That's something that is really helpful. We don't need to get into the science of it, but there is some of that too, showing that going for a walk and moving is helpful to your brain. helpful to processing things. So as a second tip, just be intentional about your breaks.
Yeah.
That's the second thing I've got for you.
Yeah. I also think it's good to just know yourself really well. Like if, for instance, if you're not on camera for the virtual event and maybe you have the capability to go on a walk as you listen to a talk, that could be a healthy
Mm,
option for you to stay moving if it's a longer event. But then if you know that you're really passionate about taking notes, maybe that's not the best route for you because, trying to walk and listen and take notes, that gets a little complicated. Um,
yeah.
also know a lot of leaders and speakers at events will, throughout the event, encourage people to share on social media about the event, which makes tons of sense for a variety of reasons, right? So know yourself well enough to know, okay, if I go on to Instagram or Twitter or Facebook or whatever to share this, is that going to potentially suck me into the vortex? Will I be disciplined? That's just, I guess I'm speaking to myself. Will I be disciplined enough to make a fun post to share with people about what I'm learning? Or maybe I should wait until the conference is over to share about it because I know myself well enough to know I just may never come out of that black hole. So,
Yeah.
just keeping tabs on knowing yourself well enough to know what the best route is for some of these approaches is a healthy
Oh, I'm
healthy
I'm
way to
so glad you
approach it.
mentioned that. I didn't even consider that there have been so many events I've attended where they weave in social media to
Yeah.
the event on purpose,
Hmm.
where they say post with this hashtag,
Yeah.
and at the end we'll do a raffle. We'll draw from the people who posted, and
Right.
somebody will win something. So like that's a fairly common element to events, especially virtually, when they try to keep people engaged and make
Right.
them feel actively involved. And so it's a great point to know yourself, because we're not saying that you shouldn't join in the fun there. I think that's a great way to be
Yeah.
engaged in the event. But yeah, know yourself and know how to put that phone down or that close that browser tab or whatever you need to once the next session has really kicked off.
Yeah.
Really, I think it's about during sessions where that distraction management is key.
Hmm.
Um, so I love that. That's great. You mentioned some note taking.
Hmm.
That's the third thing that comes to mind for me. If you're on a walk, like you said, that makes it. There's some limitations to what you can do from a note taking perspective. If you're sitting somewhere, whether you're at a desk, maybe a dining room table, or in transit in a cab or on a train or something, if you're sitting, you probably have the opportunity to write some notes.
Hmm.
So the third thing I want to put out there is around knowing how you individually best process and capture notes. So for me, I am a handwritten note person. I need that notepad in front of me as I'm listening, whether I'm in person or looking at a screen. I'm writing physical notes. I know I learn best in that format. I've got some friends who swear by typing their notes. And so if you actually prefer digital note taking, then be prepared to take notes during a session. Sometimes you can't take notes fast enough because a speaker
Mm.
is just
Yeah.
killing it with so many helpful things. Other times, maybe there's just one or two golden nuggets that you catch during a session. Wherever that is for you in that session, be ready to take some notes. That's the biggest thing, is just be ready for it. I think the first idea or tip that we've mentioned about distraction management
Hmm.
it takes you a long way to being ready to take notes because your attention is not divided. But have your notepad ready, or if you're using software, have that at the ready to take some notes, because learning, as we've discussed, involves capturing information, but then also processing it. And most virtual events have more than one speaker, more than one topic,
Yeah.
and even in a single session, you can have more than one key idea.
Hmm.
Don't trust your memory to
Yeah.
capture the notes. Write them down somewhere. So yeah, notes. Notes are a big thing for us.
Can I share something about this? Because I realized I hadn't even thought about the fact that this is something that I do, but I think it is potentially helpful, particularly helpful for a virtual conference.
Hmm.
Um, so, because we know in some cases, after you attend a virtual conference, you might actually have access to some of like what's then recorded content videos, and you can replay them. And I think in some cases you might rely on, well, maybe I can come back to this to hear it again, but you don't always have that guarantee, right? And so even when I go to in-person conferences, depending on the speaker, there have been times where on my phone I use the notes, the voice memo to record the speaker, and I still take notes, but I like to go back and re-listen to what I heard, because either I missed half of one really good nugget but I didn't get the whole thing because I was trying to scribble, or I just want to rehear something that spoke deeply to me. So I would just throw that out there. The voice memo is kind of a fun trick so that you can re-listen to the content if you just know that you're pumped to hear a certain speaker and you want to give yourself a chance to process that information a second time.
I don't think I've tried that much. I might try that with an upcoming event at some point to give that a spin. I like the idea. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah. Speaking of speakers, most speakers at events will be authors in a lot of cases. So how do we know whether we should buy the book? I feel like I'm always curious, but I don't always necessarily have the budget to buy everybody's book. So how do you decide when you're hearing someone speak, is this maybe something I should invest in?
I've had to figure this out for myself. Your mileage may vary, but I'll tell you what's helped me,
Okay.
because I got to a point where, if you can't tell by my background, I enjoy buying books and reading them. I would hear a speaker, and if they had a book, I would just buy it. Full
Mm-hmm.
stop. It didn't matter. I didn't even think about it. I would just buy the book. Um, I got to a point though where I read a few books by speakers where their speaking was a lot better than their books, and I realized maybe I should find a way to discern if I should buy the book or not.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got a few things that I tend to do at this point just to at least help me filter that decision
Yeah.
making, because it's a common thing, like you said. A lot of speakers also have books. Many speakers have multiple books. So the first thing I tend to think about is what was the vibe of their session? Did it just energize me and pump me up with like inspiration and motivation, or did they did they lead me to some kind of action that is going to be helpful for me? If it's mostly motivation, then I don't tend to buy the book, especially a printed copy. Now, if I really love their style and I see that they have narrated their own audiobook, I might get the audiobook because I want to like soak in that energy that they brought.
Yeah.
But I probably won't buy the printed book to sit down and read through it if it was mostly a motivation driven, inspiration driven session.
Yeah.
If they drove me to action, though, then I'm definitely going to at least look into their book a bit. The first thing I'm thinking about is it relevant to me now? The word now being the important one.
Mm-hmm.
If it's not, then I'm at a point where I need to manage my time better and focus it on the most important thing to me right now. And if their book is intriguing, if their topic on the stage was intriguing, but it's not super relevant to me now, usually at this point, I'm not going to buy that book yet. I'll know about it, and maybe someday in the future, if it becomes more relevant to me, I might get it. But if it's not relevant now, I'm going to try not to buy it. So I say try because I have a problem. I have a problem because I buy books a lot. If I have a vice in life, that's the one. I buy books faster than I can read them.
Yeah.
And so, I need to give myself filters such as, is it relevant to me right now? So that's what I try to think of when I hear a speaker who I know is an
Smart.
author, especially if their session is tied explicitly to one of their books. The next thing I'll do, if it is a topic that I think is relevant to me now, I want to try to suss out, are they also a good author, or is the book good in general? The
Yeah.
session might have been great on stage, but the book is still a different medium.
Yes.
And it's a question worth asking.
Is
So
it written
there are
well?
two
Is the
things.
content valuable? Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so there are two things I tend to search the internet for. The first is the phrase, the book's title,
Mm-hmm.
plus the word review. So I might search for a review of the book and just skim usually some reviews that people have written in like a blog post format.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second search I'll use is the book's title and then the word summary. because that'll usually give me multiple results where I can see the table of contents and I
Yeah.
can at least get a sense of the big ideas from the book. There's so many services out there that do this and people, individual bloggers who do this. So you're almost guaranteed to find at
Yeah.
least a few results that are either reviews or summaries, in some cases, both. And so I'll
Hmm.
search that. This literally takes me 5 minutes or less. I'm skimming, I'm not looking for depth. I'm just trying to use discernment again
Right.
and just get a little info.
Yeah.
And then the last thing I'll do, I don't rely heavily on this last one, but I still do it. I'm going to go look at review ratings. So whether it's Amazon sales, you can have up to 5 stars on Amazon, Goodreads, Audible, all of these platforms let you rate. Storygraph is another one. If you can find just the rating number and the
Hmm.
number of people who rated, that maybe can be helpful. That's been helpful to me in the past as well. Now that in some cases is kind of gamified at this point. You know,
Yeah.
writing books is a business, it's an industry. And
Right.
so I don't put too much weight in that.
That's
However,
smart.
I do still find it useful to go and just at least peek at that. That's
Yeah.
probably the thing I have the least weight on. The other ones, all in all, it takes me, 5, 6 minutes to decide if I want to buy a book from an author. But those are the things I do. It took me longer to describe it than it probably takes me to do it.
Yeah, reviews can be kind of hit or miss. I think it's good to keep in mind that not every book is for every person, and so just because it didn't speak highly to one individual who read a book and they didn't give it a great review doesn't mean that it wouldn't actually be valuable to you and a good investment of your time and energy. And so I liked your approach to first look for those summaries and collections of just the content of the book to discern for yourself whether it might be helpful. And then looking at some of the reviews to see if people essentially confirm that what's presented as here's what the book is, if they're confirming that that's truthful information and that it's helpful, then hopefully that'll set you in the right path. But yeah, that's good. Good feedback.
There's one more thing I want to share
Okay.
that I think almost is the other bookend of the way where I started. So one of the most important things for me is manage your distractions.
Hmm.
The other end of that, the bookend of most important things, is how you go beyond consuming what you've
Hmm.
heard into doing something
Hmm.
about it. And so you've said recently in some of our other conversations that learning is basically information
Hmm.
plus reflection plus action, and the
Yeah.
action being the key.
Yeah.
And so this last thing is it's just all about action. So when you are in a virtual event, it's even easier than when you're in a live event to not do anything about what you heard. Sometimes in a live setting, you're almost like in an environment where conversations naturally happen after a session in
Mm-hmm.
person, and maybe you talk with somebody about something you want to do. Well, you don't always have that in a virtual environment.
Yeah.
Some hosts of virtual events will encourage you to share stuff in like a chat, a section of an application, or to connect with other attendees and talk about this. But ultimately, it's you that has to decide this as an individual, that you're going to
Yeah.
do something with something you've heard in the session. So really for me, one of the most important things when I'm attending a virtual event is to consider, what am I going to do based on what I've heard, and my notes often inform that. I've
Mm-hmm.
often taken notes and thought about some action possibilities as I went, but I need a little bit of space on the other side of the session when it's already completely done, and now I can actually reflect on it, process it, and decide, what am
Yeah.
I going to do. There's this, I don't know what it is, riddle maybe. There's this kind of illustration that I really benefit from, and so I share it with a lot of people, and it's related to this. And it goes, there are 5 frogs sitting on a log, and 4 of them decide to jump off. How many are left? And most of us who know simple math go, well, 5 - 4 is 1, so there's 1 frog left. But the answer is 5. All 5 frogs are still on the log because 4 of them decided to jump, but they didn't jump. And so taking content beyond decision of what you want to do and actually doing the
Mm-hmm.
thing.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes this means accountability, sharing it with somebody else, maybe a colleague or a boss, manager, or just a friend. and doing the thing. So, anyways, post-event actions is how I think of that last little bucket or category for what you want to think of when you attend a virtual event.
And okay, so I know that some people professionally may have the option to just, invest in their own professional development and choose a virtual conference that they would like to attend for their own benefit. I would encourage you, if that's your tendency and you have that capability, I would encourage you to not go it alone. Like grab a friend,
Mm,
think about a coworker or even a friend outside of work who may still find value in the content that's being shared in that conference. Bring a buddy, because that way you do have another person to go back and forth with, talking about the content that you guys heard, sharing ideas, and sharing that action plan for going forward. That's just my 2 cents. Um, so
completely agree. I
yeah.
love that.
Okay, so we mentioned this earlier. We have actually two Live to Lead events coming up in February, and they happen to feature not one, but 4 respected business leaders and authors. So go ahead and tell us a little bit about what we can expect at Live to Lead. Starting with, when is it? When does this happen?
Yeah. So it's we're recording this. It's going to be captured, and at some point in the future, this will not be relevant. But if you're catching this before the end of February of 2024, well,
Mm-hmm.
then you're able to potentially check this thing out. So we've got 2 different options. This is a virtual event, and one thing we know about virtual events is that sometimes it can be difficult to carve out an entire day to attend an event. So we have 2 different versions of this. We've got a version where all 4 sessions are in one day, and then we have a version that is in 2 chunks, 2 days back to back, just to help people who it's just better for their schedule to do that in chunks. So the first option, the first opportunity, is on February 14th and 15th, and it's going to be from 12 to 2 Eastern. You're going to hear from 4 different speakers, like Laura mentioned. The other option is a couple weeks later. If you prefer to get it all out in one block, then there's a 4-hour um, option on February 27th. So you get the same content at both events.
Mm-hmm.
This has all already been captured and recorded, and we're going to walk attendees through it in a virtual way. But you get to choose kind of the best format that fits your schedule, whether it's 2 hours, 2 different days, or a single 4-hour block where you soak it all in one go. Tickets for this are super accessible. They're $79 to attend per person, but if you go and sign up early for either of the 2 options, they're only $64. So we're excited about this, and I, the idea of bringing a buddy is something that I didn't even consider. I tend to do that with events. Sometimes I go in a group because we're all already interested, but there have been some events, now that you've mentioned that, where I've actually just tried to find somebody to come with me.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes local, sometimes travel, sometimes online, and we just talk about it, because I personally learn better when I have a chance to do that kind of thing. So yeah, if you're gonna go to Live to Lead, tickets are $79 or 64 if you get them early, and bring a buddy, because that'll help.
Yeah. We've already heard these speakers, and it's all so good. So I'm
Yeah.
telling you, you guys don't want to miss this. So we mentioned we've got 4 speakers. And so I'll go ahead and share the names now. I don't want to give away too much, but you might recognize some of these names. So we've got John Maxwell, who is just a phenomenal speaker, author, leader. I mean, once you know his name, it sticks. He's so well respected. And then we've got Ryan Leake, who, if I could like siphon his energy and use that for a day here and there, I feel like that would be really helpful. He is so energetic, so passionate. He talks a lot about risk taking, which I think is an important muscle that we all need to exercise more. I would vote. Then we've got Kendra Scott, which, if that name sounds a little familiar, it's not a different Kendra Scott from the jewelry brand. It is the Kendra Scott who founded Kendra Scott Jewelry. And her story, I did not actually know. I wasn't familiar with her story. And I was quite taken with, again, her energy and her enthusiasm for what she does. She's an incredible business leader. I think, a thought leader in the business realm, particularly when it comes to women. And I really just loved hearing her share a bit about her story, and a lot of incredible nuggets for running a successful business. And then we've got Marcus Buckingham. Another, I knew his name, but I had not heard him speak before. And again, another high energy type of person, but his passion for people in the workplace and serving well, I thought was just captivating and a bit infectious, I think. Do you want to share any other reflections on these speakers, because they're pretty dynamic?
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I instantly appreciated after having a chance to see the whole event was the variety. Like they're very different speakers.
Mm-hmm.
They're very different, and so they come at their topic in different ways. They leave you with different things to consider and think
Mm-hmm.
about, each in their own way, in their own style, but with something valuable. And you mentioned the names of John Maxwell, for example, somebody who's been around a long time doing this type of important work in writing and speaking. And his talk this year, is I think the timing is really really important for what he's talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I really love the interview with Kendra Scott. I'm so excited that people get to watch that and just hear her story, and see how things that she's done in her business can maybe give them the new idea that they need to figure out what's next for theirs. Ryan talking about failure and risk. um, that's one of those topics that it's so much more helpful to hear somebody talk about their experience in failure and risk, to feel the courage to go try something yourself.
Yeah.
It's not enough, at least for me, it's not enough to just be told take a risk. And so Ryan just has a great story that he gets to share, multiple layers to it, that I think can motivate people to take that risk that maybe they've been worried about.
Yeah.
And then Marcus, I've had the pleasure of hearing him in multiple settings, live and virtual. And he's one of those authors where if he's speaking on a stage, I'm probably going to buy whatever book he just wrote. I've read each of them. I love his work. Our company, Built on Purpose, has benefited from and leverages his work. He's a researcher, and we are big fans of data-driven work and culture building. And he is right in the thick of that world, that space. So I always love learning from Marcus. So, anyways, I nerd out about this stuff, but each of these speakers is bringing something good. I need to stop though, because we need to get back to.
I know we don't want to give it away.
But, yeah.
Well, okay. One last question though. If people are considering investing in Live to Lead, we have this incredible lineup of speakers. But what else could attendees expect to gain from attending, or experience if they attend Live to Lead?
It might be obvious based on this particular video that we're talking about. Biggest thing you can expect if you join us with Live to Lead is we're going to help you figure out how to take information into action. That's anytime we're doing an event, that is at the forefront for us. We want you to not leave with information. We want you to leave with a plan that is leading directly into something actionable for you. Because for us, we don't host events because information's good. We want transformation. We want action. Yeah. So I'll keep it at that. It's that simple. We want to help you figure out how to take action. And so that's the biggest thing I think you should expect.
If Live to Lead sounds like it's up your alley, then you need to get registered today, because spots are limited and they're going to go quickly. So we've included links below for you to get more information and to go ahead and get registered, whether it's you're bringing a team, or if you're bringing a friend. You can find that information below. So, okay. So people do tend to get stuck when it comes to taking action following attending a conference or a learning experience. Where do they tend to get stuck though?
Yeah, it's so important to hone in on this aspect of action taking. And I'll tell you, the thing that helped me the most takes me back to, I want to say it was 2008. So a little bit of a story setting here. I was working at a church at the time, a fairly big church, and they were a simulcast location of a large, like, global event called I don't recall if this was the name at the time, but Global Leadership Summit is the event
Mm-hmm.
today. I was able to, because I worked at this church, I was able to attend this event at no cost, and it was just built into my work hours. Basically, I'd never gone to any event like this. At this point, I'm I don't know, 23 years old, 22 years old. I don't know how old I was pretty young. Never gone to this kind of event. I watched 2 days worth of sessions, and there was so much that
Mm.
I was inspired to do. And at the end of the event, the whole thing, everybody's this is getting wrapped up. The pastor of this church stands up in front of everybody who just watched these 2 days worth of wonderful sessions, and he basically says what I've done since then, which is when you attend an event like this, walk away with no more than 3 things you want to do.
Mm.
Something you want to do now, something you want to do soon,
Mm-hmm.
and something you want to do down the road. That helped me really simplify
Yeah.
what I was going to do, because I had so many. I was just taking notes. I was soaking.
Yeah.
I was drinking from a fire hose, you know.
Right.
And if I would have gone away and looked at my notes later and said I'm going to do all of this, I would have
Mm.
probably done none of that.
You've been overwhelmed.
I'd
It's too
probably
much.
personally, I would have been overwhelmed. I would have almost felt like analysis paralysis,
Mm-hmm.
and ended up not taking any action. So the place that I think other people often get stuck as well is in this, like, what do I actually do though? Because I've heard some really great things. In fact, I've heard maybe too many great things that I can't act on all of them at once.
Mm-hmm.
So I really encourage people to limit what they decide to do and what they commit to doing. It's going to take some sacrifice. You're gonna have to look through your list depending on the speakers and the sessions and the duration of the event. You're gonna have to decide what you're not gonna do, which might not feel
Mm-hmm.
great. So it might take a little bit of time, but prioritize the action for what's helpful and necessary for you now,
Mm-hmm.
and do that thing first. Another thing that helps me in that conversation and that thought process is I take what I feel like I should do now and what I feel like I should do soon, and I just tell somebody else.
Okay.
Whether it's that buddy I brought with me, whether it's a manager who knew I was at the event or maybe even sent me to the event, I'm going to go tell a second person or a third person, hey, this is the thing that I'm taking away from this event and I'm going to do something about. And an event like this, especially like a Live to Lead, for example, it's a fairly short event, 2 hours one day and 2 hours the next day, or a 4 hour block, in a single shot.
Mm-hmm.
You can take away even a small list of things from that event that can be so valuable to you.
Mm-hmm.
Some speakers can give you golden nuggets that can last you years of implementation.
Yeah.
And that's cool, but you want to minimize it to what am I doing now, and who can I go tell I'm going to do it, who I know I can like go back later and say, hey, I did that, and here's what happened. So there's this phrase we use at Built on Purpose that kind of speaks to this a little bit, and we like to talk about learning out loud. So sharing that commitment with a friend is a great action step. If you're working on a new concept, if you learned a new concept or a new thing that you want to try out, another thing that you can do is learn out loud, which for us is almost a form of learning and teaching. So as you tell your friend, your buddy, your coworker, or your boss, whomever, as you tell them about the event and the action you take a minute to also teach them a little bit from what you learned. Because if you take that time to give them the context and the background and the reason and the potential outcome, you're learning it again and deeper. It's a new
Mm-hmm.
layer of learning that's happening for you. And so if you want to take that learning into a kind of deeper into you, go share it with somebody else. For some of you, this might also mean like almost a light presentation. Maybe you're in a workplace where you have opportunities to share it with more than one person, with like a lunch and learn style thing.
Yeah.
Take some time to, it doesn't have to be fancy, just take some time to say, hey, I've got some notes from this event. I want to share this story that was really helpful or insightful, the main takeaway from the story, and then what I'm going to do about it. And then you add one new element. If you're learning out loud with a group, here's what you can maybe do with it too. You just kind of add that to what you're talking about. So learning out loud is a thing that can be a really helpful form of taking action. So the last thing is let somebody check in with you. If you told a person you're going to take an action,
Mm-hmm.
give them permission to ask you how it went. Give them permission to say, hey, it's been a week, or we're past that date you mentioned. How did that thing go? The more you give others permission to check in with you on that stuff, the more you will grow and develop and make the most of these virtual events.
Yeah. I mean, that accountability piece can make a huge difference in holding yourself accountable, seeing that action actually come to life. Um, it's a huge piece for sure. Okay, well, we're gonna end with a fun little quiz. Nothing too crazy, but just have a couple of questions for you that you don't know what I'm gonna ask, but let's just see how it goes.
All right, bring it.
Okay, so whether it was a virtual conference or an in-person conference, who's the best speaker you have ever heard?
Oh my gosh, I cannot answer this question, Laura. I I
Okay,
I
top
can't even
three.
pick best anything, but I've got
Give me a couple
favorites. I'll
favorites.
call them
Yeah,
favorites.
give
Yeah,
me some favorites.
and the reason I've got favorites, I'm gonna actually explain. I'll explain why.
Okay.
First one that rises to the top of my list is Patrick Lencioni,
Hmm.
and the reason I've seen him in person many times. I've watched him virtually and in webinar formats many times. In person, though, Pat Lencioni is hilarious. I love his how he just is completely himself in a session.
Hmm.
He is so intelligent, and the stuff that he has built to help and further organizational health in general is so valuable. And even if I've heard the topic he's talking about, I'm gonna go listen to him if I have the chance, because he brings an energy that it's infectious. You mentioned Ryan Leak at Live to Lead. He's got this kind of infectious energy. I'd say Pat Lencioni also has this type of energy that he brings, but he also has a presence in the room that is it makes it particularly special if you can see him in person. So I love Pat Lencioni. I love to learn from him, and I'll admit it. I love his like ADHD tendencies on stage. I got a lot of ADHD family around me, friends. It's just I love them so dearly, and I mean this sincerely. When I see Pat, it just it sometimes reminds me of people I love, and so I love to see him being completely himself. Sometimes a speaker gets too polished or gets too scripted.
Yeah.
He is just a beautiful blend of I know my material, I know this is going to be helpful, and
Yeah.
I don't know what I'm going to say every time I tell a certain
Right.
story. Like
Yeah.
it's so wonderful.
There's a beautiful balance.
I think he's a great speaker.
Nice.
Another person I really like to listen to is Simon Sinek. I think he is a really great storyteller in particular. He leans on stories a lot. If you watch him even just once, you see how much he cares about the power that a story can bring. Stories are such great vehicles for learning, and I think he is a master at telling stories. And he also has ADHD, for the record. The third person that comes to mind is somebody that is not just a speaker for me, but also somebody I've learned a lot from in terms of coaching, executive coaching, and building out coaching programs for companies. And her name is Valerie Burton. She's connected to the Maxwell leadership world. That's actually how I learned about her. And the first time I saw her speak on in this context, it was about coaching specifically. I was like, I found my person and my people. So I instantly was like going back to find other material from her. Bought multiple books, and we talked about authors and books and speakers. Valerie has a way, totally different personality on stage from the other two I mentioned. And what I love so much about her style is like you almost feel her peace when she gets on stage and starts to teach, when she's telling stories, when she's pushing you to do something that you maybe don't think you can do. She has a peaceful presence about it, but one that doesn't let you settle for where maybe you are. And there's this combination of things that I just really appreciate from her as a speaker, but also she carries that into her writing and into other formats as well. So it's more than the speaking for her that I value, but she's up there at the top for me because of those things when it comes to speakers.
Nice.
How about you though? Like, do you have any favorites from events you've attended in the past?
What sticks out for me is if I find myself, whether that's mentally or if somehow there's access online, whether it was podcast related or a video that I can pull up on YouTube. If it's something that I revisit because it's so impactful, that's really what sticks with me. Several years ago, I got to hear at a conference that I attended, this lady named Jill Briscoe, and she works in ministry. So this is a faith-based conference that I was attending. But I think too, she was such a strong storyteller. On top of that, she's British. So let's just be real, like an accent makes it more interesting sometimes. It's kind of fun, right? So I was just captivated by not just her storytelling, but she is a woman of wisdom. She is not so much in the beginning of life, but closer to the end. And so she's just got a lot of reverence for the journey of life and the different seasons that she's lived through. And in her storytelling and relaying her experiences in life, I found it so encouraging. Ultimately, it was just a beautiful way to encourage the listeners. There are some entertainers that I really love just hearing speak, because I think they have plenty of wisdom to lend as well. Viola Davis is someone that I deeply respect, and I love to hear her speak. She's so wise and generous and funny and honest. And so anytime I can hear her share her thoughts on a topic, I just find it really interesting. And if you have not read her memoir, I'll give a little plug. I feel like it's really good. So I highly recommend it.
I love
it. Those are a couple of my favorites. So yeah. Well, okay. So the other question that I had was, when you are getting ready to attend a conference, whether it's virtual or in person, do you have any favorite kind of what I would call like a personal practice or a ritual of some variety in preparation? This could be anything from there's certain pair of shoes that make you feel comfy, or there's a favorite snack, or you look forward to having a specific pocket of time to just reflect because that's something that just fills you. So what are some of your go-tos when you're getting ready to attend a conference? What do you enjoy?
Yeah. Two things come to mind. I'll keep it short. I want to say I heard this first from a guy named Dan Sullivan. He created Strategic Coach. He talks about how when you go to an event, or even if you approach a book that you're going to dig into, you're going to find what you're looking for. If you can attune your attention to looking for something specific, then you're more likely to find it. And so for me, in the event context, and he talks about this in the context of events often, if I know the roster of people speaking and I kind of have a sense of who's attending or who I'm likely to encounter, I'm going to try to, ahead of the event, consider what are the 2 or 3 things I want to find at this event. Maybe it's a connection I want to make with a person. Maybe it's a specific idea or concept I'm stuck with and I need to get unstuck. Whatever I'm looking for, before the event even starts, I want to decide so that I am more attentive to find the things that I'm looking for. That's
so
the
smart.
first thing. Yeah. The second thing is, you actually mentioned it. It has to do with reflection. Anytime I'm at an event, in person or online, I'm going to build into my schedule time to process it. And for me, that means usually me in a notepad and sometimes outdoors. I'm going to sit and just look at the notes I took, and that's where I'm usually committing to some kind of action, or filtering even down to what the actions will be. Processing time is important, and so for me, if I'm not careful, I don't give myself that time, and I just go into the hustle and bustle of work after an event's over, or I just rush to the airport to try and go home, or whatever. So I try to build in time, in person or online, that'll allow me the opportunity to reflect and really narrow down what am I going to do based on what I just experienced.
Those are really smart practices. That first one, kind of know what you're looking for going into the event. It's so smart because it keeps you focused and your senses a little more heightened and in tune with what's going on. It doesn't close you off to be surprised. So if something unexpected, some kind of nugget comes your way, you're not going to miss it. You're probably going to be even more attuned to what's happening to catch that moment, even if it's not specifically what you were looking for. But that's really smart to mentally prepare yourself to ask yourself, what am I looking for in attending today? I love that.
If you're watching this and you've heard something that you are going to take with you into an event, let us know what it was. We want to know
Yeah.
what clicks with you, what resonates. Let us know in the comments. But also, if you've got additional ideas or tips
Mm-hmm.
that help you prepare for virtual events, please also take a minute to share those, because again, going back to this phrase we like, learn out loud, we feel like learning is kind of a communal effort. And
Yeah.
so we want to not just be here teaching, we want to learn with everyone here. So if you've got some things you want to add, definitely let us know. And maybe we can come back later and include some of those in a future conversation.
Well, thanks for sharing these thoughts and chatting with me today about the pros of virtual conferences and how to best prepare for them. I'll give one little extra plug for Live to Lead because I'm super excited about it. We've already got people signing up, and we know that spots are limited. So hopefully you'll get a chance to hop in there with us. So we hope to see you soon.